And the judges can now introduce themselves.
Good morning, North Carolina. My name is Maria Garnett. I am your neighbor just to the north. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm a state government policy professional. So my current role is as a policy advisor with the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services. A lot of my background is doing nonpartisan policy analysis and evaluating the performance of government programs for the Virginia General Assembly. This is my third year of involvement with We the People, and I am so excited to be here with you today.
Good morning. My name is Petra Al-Soufi, and I'm here in Michigan. I am the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. We do research on American Muslims and other faith communities. I'm also on the board of the Michigan Center for Civic Education. Many years ago, I was in your place as a student participating in We the People program. So I know this is a fun experience, stressful a little bit, but it will be something that you remember for a very long part of your life. So very excited to have you here, and let Dan introduce himself.
Good morning, North Carolina. My name is Dan Wong. I'm a retired attorney and former judge. I'm on the National Board of Directors for the Center for Civic Education, and I live in Boise, Idaho. The two last opportunities to go to the national competition in Leesburg, Virginia, we got to go visit cousins in North Carolina. You have a beautiful state. We visited Oak Island, Outer Banks. You're very fortunate to be able to live there. It's beautiful. Looking forward to your testimony this morning. Thank you.
Great. So please go ahead and introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Hi, my name is Andrew Betcher.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Pender.
Hi, I'm Allison Jimerson. We are all seniors at Raleigh Charter High School, and our teacher is Ms. Klein.
Great, thank you so much. I am going to read your Unit 6 question. President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." Do you agree or disagree? Why? What disagreements did the founders have about a standing army, and are they relevant today? And to what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence? You may begin.
The Anti-Federalists were strongly opposed to the idea of a standing army during the debates at the Constitutional Convention. After years of rule by a king who controlled a large standing army, the Anti-Federalists greatly feared repeating history. In an Anti-Federalist paper written by the old Whig, he expresses concern for how easily a president could use the power as commander-in-chief of the military to make himself king. Furthermore, Robert G. Yates states that having a standing army would make the U.S. susceptible to Europe's constant tension.
On the other hand, Federalist Alexander Hamilton felt a standing army was necessary to protect the country from foreign invaders, as well as Native American tribes. The Federalists also believed that a central army was needed to defend the country, being as large and diverse as it was.
Recently, the Trump administration set a dangerous precedent by using federal troops against protesters during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and by not committing to a peaceful transition of power, an action condemned by many on both sides of the aisle. An open letter signed by 10 former defense secretaries stated their fear of military involvement interfering with the peaceful transition of power after the 2020 election. These current events demonstrate how the disagreements presented by the founders are still relevant today.
We agree with Eisenhower's opinion about the potential dangers of the military-industrial complex because we are able to observe these misplaced powers as well as the unwarranted influences. Since 9/11, the United States government has spent $127 billion to train police officers, military, and Border Patrol officers. Furthermore, Open Secrets estimates that the entire defense industry spent around $45 million on lobbying during the 2020 election cycle. In 2015, the US closed hundreds of military bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, but still had 800 bases in more than 70 countries, which at the time was more than Britain, France, and Russia combined. Many of these bases were established during World War II and the Cold War. Thus, most Americans view the military-industrial complex as normal.
Many U.S. bases have come under fire for how they have essentially left a trail of waste in foreign countries. The U.S. military has polluted drinking water in Guam, poured toxic chemicals in the Philippines, caused acid rain downwind of military power plants, and pumped millions of gallons of raw sewage into the oceans. The General Accounting Office has recognized and noted that the Department of Defense has taken responsibility for mismanaging hazardous waste on international bases. In theory, the American Armed Services are supposed to follow the environmental laws of the US or of the foreign nation. However, neither can be enforced because US regulations stop at our border and military bases are commonly exempt from the foreign laws of nation.
Not only does the military have a history of pollution, but also a history of raping female citizens in foreign countries. A direct link has been proven between US troops, increased levels of prostitution, and violence against sex workers. An article by Time magazine states that between 2003 and 2007, it is believed that US troops and foreign military contractors sexually abused 53 children in and around Melgar, Colombia. Our military consistently hides and ignores the negative impacts they have on foreign countries.
During World War II, the US military helped in the fight against fascism by supporting the Allied nations, proving that when US intervention is focused on the needs and wants of foreign countries, it can have a positive impact.
However, our country has no right to decide whether or not another country needs our help. An overwhelming number of citizens in host countries do not see the strong military presence as necessary or useful. These host countries are not given the power to make their own military decisions. We recognize the complexity of US involvement abroad and understand the numerous perspectives that can be taken, but we must come to terms with the reality of what US involvement abroad truly entails. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to start off with a question about something you referenced earlier on with last summer's Lafayette Square incident and fears about the peaceful transition of power. What would you do, or what do you think is necessary to ensure that a president cannot abuse power in that way in the future?
I mean, you can just use the example of what happened after the Capitol riots, essentially, when President Trump wouldn't allow for the military to go out and bring that back in. So the vice president and I believe his cabinet kind of had to override his decision. And I think that was a perfect example of how our government and our Constitution is working to ensure that if the president does get out of control, somebody can come in and bring it in.
Yeah, and just to strengthen that, I think invoking the 25th Amendment, I think, is a place that there was a lot of talk of doing in terms of if the president is misusing the military, then maybe they're not fit for duty in the office anymore.
Thank you. My follow-up question is, it seems clear from your presentation that you're not in favor of the US military expansion overseas. There are a lot of issues there. The follow-up question I have is, if the US, also with the harm that the US military is doing, there's a lot of good that it does. There's clearly a reason for its presence there. And if the US military leaves, aren't we leaving that space open for example, China or Russia to replace our military bases and spread something other than democracy, which will put the rest of the world in harm?
Yeah, I can start with this one. I think it has been shown that Russia has been doing this. When US troops pulled out of Syria, there was a New York Times investigation that found that Russian troops were seen at the exact same post days later. So I think it's a very valid concern to have. But I think a question, I think, is, are we really spreading democracy in these countries? I mean, we could look at Afghanistan, or we could look at our involvement during the Cold War in Vietnam and South Korea and Iran, and the overthrowing of their leader there and installing the Shah. I think when we say we're spreading democracy, often we aren't, or our motives are not. We say we're spreading democracy when in reality we're protecting our own interests. And I think that even if we do say we're spreading democracy, we are not.
I agree with Andrew. If we look back to the Cold War, especially in America, the idea of McCarthyism that spread across America rapidly, which was anti-communist behaviors, anything at all. If communism was even talked about in the United States, people were blacklisted, they could never get a job again. And so I think we really need to put our values and see what our values really are, and we need to spread that to America so that Americans can make the decision and help the military and actually have knowledge about what we're spreading and what we're doing in these foreign countries. Because like in our paper, a lot of people don't know. And so I feel like we really need to start educating our citizens on what exactly we're doing, and they should have a say in what we're doing as well.
So your testimony indicated that you recognize the complexity of U.S. military involvement in the world. Can you give me one or two guiding principles that the U.S. should follow in exercising military presence in the world? One or two guiding principles.
I can start with that one. I think one guiding principle is with what President Carter used a lot was if human rights are being violated and that is involved, then that's some place where we should get involved. Because, say, example, the Holocaust, that was an example where the whole world came and fought against Nazis for the sake of the Jewish people who were getting persecuted and killed. So I think that's a great example of when something like that is happening, then that's when the United States should interfere.
Yes, and I also think that asking host nations when they want our involvement, I think, is a big part. One of the guiding principles we could use is when they ask for help, we help them. And looking at allies and when they need help, and talking with the UN and seeing, and NATO, and using those larger international organizations to guide our own decisions in military involvement.
And I think most importantly, we need to look after our own citizens. Like, we are a democracy, we are for the people, by the people, and we need to be able to say, we're in danger, we need your help. And we need to re-educate the police force in order to do that. With all of the bias, we need bias training in order to have the police safer for more people. We need America to be fair, and we need people there to protect us that aren't against us.
Thank you.
So that actually leads pretty nicely into the other question I wanted to ask you all. Knowing that what's appropriated for defense purposes should be used for defense purposes, how would you reallocate the funding that currently is keeping a strong U.S. military presence overseas to better defend our nation and to actually play more of a positive role in the world?
I think a lot of that money can be reallocated to services that could help public health. For example, during a time in a pandemic, we needed a lot of money to make sure that hospitals were getting PPE and all the stuff like that. And unfortunately, money was in the Defense Department that wasn't in the public health department. So I think that is a good example of not only helping with welfare and stuff like that could help people get pulled out of poverty instead of just going into the military.
Yes, and I think we see that most of the military is really, or our military industrial complex is seen as a jobs program for Americans in terms of Boeing, BAE Systems, Raytheon. They like to, quote unquote, spread the love basically around everyone's district where there's a little bit of jobs everywhere. So I think we need to stop thinking of the military as this almost jobs program that give American jobs, when in reality, we could just be almost skipping the middleman of needing war to be able to pay Americans, when in reality, we could just improve social programs like Allison was talking about and basically skip the middleman of the military industrial complex. Totally.
Just kind of going back to my point that I said earlier, we need to make sure that the people that are defending us as citizens are the right people that we should be putting in that place. We've seen through the Black Lives Matter protests that there's unfair treatment of Black Americans as to white Americans when cops are involved. And that's something we really need to look at and fix first before we think about other countries. We need to make sure that our citizens feel safe and feel protected in their own homes before we worry about someone else overseas.
Is the culture of the U.S. military reflective of the U.S. culture, the culture of the citizens? Why or why not?
I would say there is, only because the U.S. military is going into these foreign countries who we see as threats or whatever. And then that's creating back at home xenophobia, racism towards these places that we go into. So I think it's a direct reflection, and it just causes more division between Americans who live in the United States.
I'm gonna have to disagree. I feel like the military and a lot of the propaganda that's used in the military, like Marvel movies, have a lot of military propaganda because the military give them these supplies in order to make these movies. And so in return, they make the Army look great and like a savior, I would say.
Okay, that's time.
Great job to you all. We are going to give you some of our feedback now. First of all, your content knowledge and the diversity of types of evidence that you cited was really remarkable to me. And I just want to commend you for that. But with that in mind, this felt very much like a back and forth just conversation and discussion that we were all having together. And I think that demonstrates your maturity and your deep engagement with these ideas. That's exactly what this program is all about. And I am so excited for the future of your state and this country, knowing that, you all are citizens who are going to be, taking on the mantle. One piece of feedback that I have is, I would be a little careful about, when you're starting out with an opinion statement and then sort of backing it up with evidence. Sometimes it can be helpful to go in the reverse order, state what you think is the supporting evidence and then say, why your personal opinion does align with that. That can make for a stronger argument. But yeah, you guys did an amazing job, and I hope that you feel really good about it.
I completely agree. I think the questions we asked, trying to see if, what area of this question that you haven't really thought about, and clearly you've thought about a lot of them. Clearly you, one thing that was impressive for me was that you took positions and you defended them. You were not shy to, try to give us as many options as possible. You took a position, you stated the problem, and you gave us but here's our opinion about it too. And the other thing is, each one of you participated in the knowledge or an area that you were knowledgeable about. You didn't try to speak about something that you didn't know. So again, that shows that each one of you specialized in certain parts of the question. So again, very impressive. I think I really enjoyed this conversation.
So this is the second very good, excellent presentation in a row. Boy, today is going to be something else if it keeps going like this. I really enjoyed your 4-minute presentation, and I really enjoyed your answers to our cross-examination questions, because you're very articulate, very knowledgeable, well prepared. It was a pleasure to listen to you all. And clearly, your ability to answer our cross-examination questions, which you have no idea what we're going to ask, shows that you have done a lot of preparation. You have a lot of knowledge. It was just, for me, it was just a joy to listen to you. Congratulations. Good job.
And then oh yes,